A total of 70 million votes have already been cast in this year's presidential election through early or mail in voting. As you can see, we can see the party registration of the early voters in each individual state. We don't exactly know who they are voting for. However, we do know, for example, in my home state of Connecticut, we could see that 42% of early voters are Democrats, 35% are independents and other third party registrations, and 23% are Republicans. That 70 million number is important. For reference, 155 million ballots were cast nationally in the 2020 presidential election. So 70 million is certainly a large chunk of that. I mean, just look, 70 million makes up basically all of the votes that Donald Trump received in the last election. So looking at this map, it is a very interesting map. We're going to be mapping it out today on the electoral map and see, if the actual results completely resemble the early voting, which they won't. But what that would look like, it just lets us, get a grasp of how this election is going for both of the candidates. This is a really shocking map, as you'll see by the end of this video. Democrats are performing extremely well across the Rust Belt, while Republicans have shrinking leads, but still leads across the Sun Belt battleground states. So, with that being said, let's start with our safe Democratic states. Again, this map is based purely off of the early voting data that we have. And nationally, you could see it's tied 40-40 to independents being 20. So, let's see how this plays out across the battleground states. So, starting, as I said, with our safe Democratic states, in my forecast, these are all safe Democrat, as well as early voting. So, you can see states like Washington, there is a 19-point lead for Democrats there. California, there is a 21, I'm sorry, 31, no, 21. A 21-point lead in California for Democrats. I brought up Connecticut there before. It is what, a 22% lead for Democrats in Connecticut. We'll just go through all the states right now. As I said, Washington, California, Hawaii, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Vermont. I have to check up on some of them. Some of them might be close. DC doesn't have early voting. But you can see, let's take a look at some of these states where the Trump campaign does have, somewhat hopes of narrowing down these traditionally safe Democratic states. But New Jersey, so far, they're not seeing much action. New York, they are not seeing much action. Those ones are safe Democrat as well. And by the way, in terms of margin, a safe margin is a 15% or higher margin. You could see Illinois is over 15% margin. Whoops, wrong map. So those are the safe Democratic states. I might add a couple, but as of now, that is where it stands. As for Donald Trump, he has some early states as well. You could see him across the Midwest. That the Republican firewall across the Midwest. That is, Republicans have very strong leads down ballot, and importantly, actually, well, Texas is not safe. They're at a 14-point lead right now, so not quite safe there. But regardless, they have the vast majority of these Midwestern states are all safe. In terms of district, we don't have district by district margins, so I will just assume that Nebraska's second is Democrat and Maine's second district is Republican. Compared to, regardless of what the rest of the state results might be, and you could see across the South they're performing well as well. And then Missouri, Kentucky, Mississippi, and Alabama are the four states that don't have early voting. But for simplicity of this video, I will just characterize them as safe because in all reality that is what they will be on election day. Let's take a look at Missouri doesn't have it. Okay. And then you've got Indiana, only voted for Trump by 16, almost a likely state in 2020. Let's see, I'm trying to find Indiana on this map. And yeah, it's a very strong lead for Republicans there. And West Virginia, the last time I made a video like this, was not safe. It was actually likely, and it remains a likely state. That is very interesting. West Virginia voted for Trump by 39 points in the last election, but they only lead by 13 in the early voting so far. So, as I said, I might add a few as we go through the rest of the states that I missed that are 15% margins or higher. But that being said, let's move on to likely states. So, for Democrats, they've got Oregon. That's an 8-point win right now for Democrats there. Looking around the map, I would expect Maine to be likely. Let's check on that. Maine is 28 to 43. So that is actually exactly a 15-point margin. So actually, Maine would be safe. That's really interesting. And, notice how independents are second in Maine while Republicans are third. That's the case for quite a few states. But I still am putting Maine's second district for the simplicity of the video to get a proper grasp on how things are going. Um, New Hampshire, looking at it now, remains very close. That one actually isn't likely yet, but Democrats do have a lead. Let's look at Virginia now, where Democrats do have a strong lead of 11 percentage points. That does fall under a likely margin. Very similar, for what it's worth, to Biden's 10-point win in the last election. Now, looking across the map, you've got Colorado. Let's check in on Colorado. So, independents, not surprisingly, lead in Colorado. It's a very independent state. But look at that, Democrats versus Republicans. It's incredibly close. I would not expect that, only a 2-point lead. However, in New Mexico, starkly different. Democrats have a 10-point lead in New Mexico. That one is a likely state for sure. And checking in on Minnesota. Wow, Democrats have a huge lead of 21 points. Independents make up a large portion of the vote. But clearly, Tim Walz being the Democratic VP pick, that is boosting up their numbers in Minnesota. So Minnesota is actually a safe state for the Democrats. That's really interesting to see. Oregon likely, but Minnesota safe. It's usually flipped in the actual results. As for Donald Trump, he has quite a few likely states as well. As I brought up earlier, Texas is a 14-point lead for them. So, very strong lead in Texas. I don't think it'll be remotely competitive this time around. So they've got that. South Carolina is actually a safe margin. I missed that one. That's a big 19-point lead in South Carolina so far. That's strong for them. And then Florida. Florida's important. They have a massive 12-point lead in the state of Florida. I mean, the Democratic Party of Florida is really, ineffective. That has been proven in these past few elections. Republicans really proving to have a stranglehold on the Florida electorate. That one's a likely margin, gives them a huge boost. Then you move over to West Virginia, where Republicans do lead. But again, very narrow, which is interesting. They only lead by 13 points in a state Trump won by 39. That is just odd. That's the only way to describe it. Republicans also lead in the state of Ohio. Trump won it by 8% in the last election. Republican registration currently leads by 8 percentage points there. So Ohio is a likely state as well. And I think there are a couple more, and traditionally very much swing states. In Nevada, that is exactly a 5-point margin there in Nevada for Republicans. They're looking very strong, however, so far in Nevada, but I will warn you, it is shrinking day by day. Actually, just today, there was a huge dump of Democratic votes from Clark County that boosted them up by something like 6,000 votes or so. And it was extremely strong sign for the Democrats. This should narrow up a little bit, but going into Election Day, Republicans do have a very strong lead in Nevada, likely margin victory there. And then let's move on to Alaska. Republicans actually have a huge lead. This one's safe because independents make up almost half of the electorate, which of course it all matters how independents break. I mean, the major theme of characterizing all these states is how the independents break. Even if you've got 10% or 11% of registered independents like Michigan, in a close race, it just matters how those independents will break, who those independents will break for. And then that is it. That is it for likely states. Let me just check up on Georgia. Yep, that one's lean. So now we'll move on to lean states. These are states that are. I'm sorry. Wait, there is actually one more. There is one more that I know, and I didn't even think to check up on this one because I'm so not used to characterizing it as likely. But as you can see, in Wisconsin, with 1.3 million votes cast, Democrats have a lead over Republicans of 9%. However, look at that independent vote, 41% registered independents. So 9-point lead in Wisconsin over Republicans for Democrats. That's huge. And oh my God, I can't believe I completely forgot to characterize this one. Pennsylvania is safe. Democrats have done a tremendous job of getting out the early vote. It has narrowed significantly. Not significantly, marginally since the last video. They were ahead by 30 points. Now they're ahead by 24. But look at that, 57 to 33. An absolute tremendous lead for Democrats in the state of Pennsylvania. That is a safe margin state. Now we will move on to lean states. These are 1 to 5% margins. So let's look at New Hampshire. New Hampshire Democrats are ahead by 4%. Biden won it by 7. I don't know exactly what it tells us, but there you have it. You've got Colorado. Colorado independents make up 42% of the plurality. Democrats, very weak, 2-point lead over Republicans. But, of course, it all comes down to independents, and independents in Colorado break heavily for the Democratic Party. But still, a 2-point lead for Democrats there. Then you've got, turning the script here to the Republican leads. In Georgia, you've got a 3-point lead for Republicans. That's important. In North Carolina, they have a 1-point lead. Both these leads are shrinking day by day. And we'll see if either of them flip, especially North Carolina, by Election Day. But as of now, Democrats and Republicans are essentially tied, but Republicans do have the slight upper hand in both these states, and that is huge. However, I will warn you, in predominantly African American voters, turn out in droves on election day. Compared to Rust Belt states and everything, Republicans always do better in the Sun Belt states. In the Southern states, or should I say, Democrats actually just do weaker, right, in the Southern states than they do in the Rust Belt states. But just tradition, just whatever culture, I guess you could say. But that is where things stand right there. And then they've got Arizona, where they retain their lead. Sorry, I completely misread this number before, I guess, but Republicans have a 9-point lead right now, 42-33. I don't know what I was looking at before, I guess. I don't know. I have no idea. But Arizona is a very strong lead for Republicans. But it's 255-262. It all comes down to Michigan and Iowa. What? Well, let's check up on Michigan first. Michigan, Democrats ahead by 3 points. So Democrats do take the state of Michigan. And then finally, so they're at 270. They do win the election. And then Iowa. Iowa, if you remember in my last video, if you watched it on this, it was tied. I'm sorry, it was Democrats up by 4. And just this morning, last time I checked, which was this morning, it was tied 39-39. Now Republicans have taken the lead by a point. Republicans have taken the lead in Iowa. Don't ask me why it's this close, or it was ever this close, or why Democrats were leading. I do not know. Trump won it by 8. So for what it's worth, not a good sign, but as you can see, look at that race. 270-260. Absolutely extraordinary. Extraordinarily close, and just extraordinary in general, that an early vote map could spell such a close race. I mean, in 2020, it was so lopsided. Every election before that, it was so lopsided in favor of Republicans, because older voters traditionally voted early. Now, more older voters are voting Democrat. But just look at that. Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania all go to Harris. And that's 270 right there. So it really demonstrates the importance of the blue wall states. If Trump wants to win this election or have a chance at winning this election, he has to break the blue wall. It's just a fact. He has to. Probably Wisconsin is the one based off early voting data alone. Michigan would be the one, but wow. Anyway, this map, again, very weird, very shocking. You've got likely R, West Virginia, while you've got safe, blue, Pennsylvania, while you've got likely R, Arizona. Whatever, for what it's worth, it's always fun to map, but this is where things stand. So thank you all for watching this video. If you enjoyed, make sure to subscribe down below and drop your comments. Let me hear your thoughts on this, and I will see you all later.